And tonight we welcome Kersten Geers from Belgium. What does it mean to reduce architecture to its essential condition? More provocatively, what kind of politics does this reduction conceal? These questions have driven one of the most intellectually rigorous practices of the past 2 decades, and they speak directly to what we consider the stakes of architectural education today. Founded in Brussels in 2002 with David van Severen, Office KGDVS has developed what Geers terms architecture without content, frameworks that reveal rather than conceal their own ideological operations, making neutrality visible as a position. Often recognized as one of the world's truly original voices in present-day architecture, their influence operates through addressing architecture's incapacity to keep pace with changes in technology, in program, lifestyle, and behavior. Rather than futile programmatic prediction, Geers proposes, quote, space that is pleasurable and an understanding of architecture as well-proportioned frames within which complexities of life unfold, unquote. Architectural critic and historian Roberto Gargiani note in his book, quote, the ability to preserve in every project, the spark of a theoretical construction, carried out accordingly to a rigorous economy of means. Even the new monuments for public institutions continue to be illuminated by a creative tension of radical superiority, unquote. Their understanding of design as a cultural project and a conversation between people and across time generates projects that maintain intellectual coherence across scales, from the Swiss radio and television building in Lausanne to the VRT headquarters in Brussels. Perhaps most significantly for us as educators, Geers exemplifies how practice and pedagogy can be mutually reinforcing. As founding member of San Rocco magazine, author of Without Content and Excess of Architecture, and professor at the Academy of Architecture in Mendrisio, investigating the Modern Project, studios that investigate modernism's failure to promise and to propose, and he proposes to resuscitate its emancipatory potential through renewed formal strategies. These two aspects of the office's work are explicitly mirroring each other, creating unexpected parallels between academic and practical work. Kersten and we first met in this kind of educational setting where we both taught studios at the GSD. But I noticed the firm's work much earlier when we were both featured in the Architecture Vanguard in 2009. Even then, their work stood out for its clarity of intention. That early promise has since been confirmed by a series of major recognition, from the Silver Lion at the Venice Biennale to the Belgium Prize for Architecture, and through significant exhibitions at institutes like the Canadian Centre for Architecture. But what truly cements Office as a critical voice and what makes them essential to contemporary discourse is not the answers they provide, but their capacity to reframe architectural problems. They've shifted the debate from what should architecture do to what can architecture be. This fundamental reorientation has influenced how a generation of architects thinks about disciplinary possibility and constraint. Please join me in welcoming Kersten Geers.
Thank you, Rosanna. Can I take this out? Yes. I must admit that I started to think it would be better that you do the lecture. It's much more interesting for me as well. But okay, I'll try to live up to the announcement. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure also to be invited by Rosanna. Indeed, I think we have crossed our paths a few times, and with lots of pleasure. We were very happy to coincide at the GSD for a certain period of time. And I also truly believe it's important for our generation to speak out and to ask ourselves. I think we're also starting to be gradually an aging generation, and we speak to much younger people. To ask a certain amount of questions about architecture, in the hope, of course, that everybody here already finds better answers, or maybe would try to reformulate these questions in quite a different way. So I don't know. I have the feeling that after 20 years of office, it's actually 23 years meanwhile, and many years, maybe, also 23 years of teaching. I increasingly also feel that whatever I have to say about architecture is what I wanted to say, and perhaps now it's time for other people to speak. So architecture is culture. It's very important that one gives a set of, I would say, hints at what it could be, and they picked up, and we move on. So, well, look, I guess here I'd like to make a presentation which will be terribly long. So anybody who gets bored, you can walk away. I don't feel personally attacked or anything. I think I have 288 slides. So just that you know. Okay. It's work which we've done in the office. Actually, it's quite recent material I would like to show. It has somehow the title, which was the title I had announced, right? What was it? The big house in the large city. And then again, it's not that title really. Actually, I changed the title. It's called 456. Why is it called 456? Well, in a way, because, and I will explain that, 456 is, and I do a little bit of, I would say, kind of a commercial interlude. 456 is the name of the exhibition, very small exhibition, which we open tomorrow evening at A83 Gallery in New York. Actually, that's how it more or less looks like. And of course, now you have an idea, it's still interesting to go. But 456, and I just show a few images. 456, and the dog is, of course, only a visitor, but it's also, and in parallel, it's this, and in a way both are related. 456 is the second set of, I would say, volumes, because we made once volume 1, 2, 3, which was some sort of monographic or attempt for a kind of monographic overview, which we presented about 8 or 9 years ago. And so 456 is after that. So 456 is after 1, 2, 3, so as you can imagine. And 456 is in the show, in the exhibition, as you see it here. It's only a set of photographs by the Dutch photographer Bas Prinsen and the Italian photographer Stefano Graziani and the Italian photographer Joanna Silva. You see them here, which are part of what we call the grey pages. And these grey pages were also in the first 3 volumes as we made them as some sort of interruptions. They made a kind of context to what we had been making until then. And in 456, it's the same. So here you see, they're printed very beautifully by Owen and Clara in duotone. They're very beautiful A2 documents. But in a sense, they're the reproduction of what you see here on the wall of this book in the making, which is all these great pages where there's always 4 pages done by Bas Prinsen, then Stefano Graziani, and so forth. And they're in a way representing this parallel traveling. And I think this parallel traveling is very important for us as makers of architecture. That is that they show things which are not always ours. They show architects which we have been investigating. And I believe Bill is also here in the audience of the archives. So one of these was that we made this book on Venturi and Scott Brown, but more specifically on the difficult hole. I think 12, 13 years ago. Then we made one on the urban fact of Rossi. Then we were working on Aldo and Hanni van Eyck, on Giancarlo De Carlo. There's all these things. More recently on Itsugo Hasegawa. So all these, in a way, compagnons de route, one could say, they are distilled in this. And I start with that because I think it's important. So anything you will see after that is not about that. So you can forget it too. But in a certain sense, I think these elements, so that what you see in the gallery is not the work. That's what you see on this wall is not the work, but it is the work, because without this, the work wouldn't exist. So 456 for that reason is the name of this lecture, and I didn't even start the lecture yet. Can you imagine? It's horrible. I mean, so it's the name of this lecture. In a simple way, it's 3 books in the making, almost there. It's all this, the grey pages, but it's also in a way 3 topics. So you will see that 4 is one idea, 5 is another idea, and 6 is the last idea. And in some sense, although it's chronological, because that's how monographies work somehow, you feel that every time you make a step, you seem to change a little bit your mind. So, well, I'll start with 4. You see, I promised it's a bit related to the title, The Big House. So 4 is the big house. I will show you 3 projects so you can count. So 4 is 3 projects, 5 is 3 projects, 6 is 3 projects, and then who knows, there's something else, but that's very small. So 4, the big house. Now, after the first many years of work, and we started very much, and I don't show anything about that, but we started with investigations on the house and the room and the sequence of the room and the dimensions of the room and all this stuff in small projects very often. We started to work on projects of a slightly different scale. And these projects were often, I would say, and I think it's very important, public. That's, of course, a very complex term, but they were not per se very big. I mean, so the question is, how do you make a building which has a certain responsibility in its context and is proud enough to say, here I am, I'm public, or I'm shared, or I'm civic, or I'm collective, but I don't necessarily have the capacity to be too grand. So the project certainly which brought us to this thought, so this thought of the big house. The big house, you could say, is a house, but it's just bigger. And because it's bigger, it all of a sudden, behaves as something more important in some sense. I mean, and perhaps it's an idea of a collective building there where, the big, in a way, extremely hollow gesture of, I don't know, transparency, easy access, and all that kind of stuff, which one relates to public, is not necessary. So here, the big house, I think, was or is the best exemplified, and these numbers are office numbers. I mean, of course, we did not make 125 buildings before we did this one. Yes, we did projects, but I mean, most of them didn't happen, of course. So, and this 126 is what they call a dar. You see that here. I don't know if that thing works. Well, you see it there. Dar. So it's white spot, and you always see the white spots in this. Remember the other part of the title, large city. I mean, this is not a particularly enormous city. It's not a metropolis. This is Rifa in Bahrain. It's just all somehow occupied, and what is not occupied is somehow desert. So you zoom in, and actually what used to be, and when you zoom out, you see that somehow you think it's a fairly coherent structure. You zoom in, actually what you see is that there's here and there a couple of houses with courts, which used to be the texture, gradually replaced by 3-story buildings. Why? Because that's what they can build there now. So the rules have changed, we can build 10 meters, so they squeeze in 3 stories, and that's what happened. So fairly, I would say, clumsily built 3-story houses, and then this thing there in the middle. So what is this? It's a place which has been used many years by generations of men, really only men, who make some sort of music. And this music they make, why do they make it? Because they used to do pearl fishing. It's kind of a tradition which was long gone when we were involved in this project, and that pearl fishing forced them into kind of being on a boat for a couple of days, weeks. They kind of, as a group, they kind of kept the morale high. They made this music, and then when they were on land, they did the same. Now, with after finding oil, as you can imagine, pearl fishing was out. But somehow a little bit fragments of that tradition survived, and from father to son, this was given to each other, and so that's what they have been doing until now. They make that music, they gather together in a house, dar, the Arabic word for house. So we were asked by the Ministry of Culture to think of what you can here symbolize a mirror image with the same, here you see it either here or there, this house, to do something with it, make it more public, they thought. Make it, extend it with some sort of temporary stay, make it to a certain extent more accessible. But that for something which you could say, you saw that on this picture, something which in a way is done very much in private. They always made this music in private. So that was for us an interesting question. So what we did, you cannot see that here necessarily, but so this old house, nothing is really old in Bahrain, but let's say it's about 80 years old or something. So you zoom in here. It had a wall which we removed. We, in a way, repaired it in its own old kind of, I would say, typology, a big court, and in a way, these fairly narrow rooms around it, very typical. We added a little bit of things, to make it work as a private, a little private complex. And rather than mutating this thing, we said, no, we build in front a building which follows all the, I would say, current rules, so 10-meter high, as all the other neighbors, so it fits to a certain extent. But since it's a very small plot, it becomes some sort of little tower, you see that? So that's this 10-meter house, high house, the big house next to the house. This is the Dar, and this became in a way known as our Dar project. So that's also how I think we gradually started to think, they're Dars, so they're houses, so they're big houses. So this idea that next to this set of rooms around the court, you have 3 rooms, one on top of the other, stacked. You saw it a little bit in the plan. So the plan is always somehow the same. The room doesn't carry anything. Actually, these columns carry. There's also some ducts here. Everything you need, a kind of a little toilet, air course, whatever, a stair is outside. The plate sticks out, and then it's protected, as you could see in the section. Okay, and then you see here, you see it somehow naked and kind of dressed, you could say. That's the early models as we made it. So you see here this the logic of these rooms. You see that here. So small places to stay. If of similar guys would come from, say, Kuwait for a weekend where they would make this music together. But most importantly, that room below, as you see here, there. This is some Matt Mulliken references on how this thing would like to be public, and you see it here. It stands there in the side. You see the actual house, the real Dar, so to speak. And most important, that when then this, as we call it, measureless, kind of a public space, when it's in function, then the dress opens. Also, this panel open. I don't have a picture of this one here now. We made a bigger one actually earlier, and this is the small one which was designed before but was never built. And then it becomes a part of the city. So as you see, there's even kind of a plinth or kind of threshold. There's doors, there's rooms. It's a house, really. But then, yeah, big. Not because it's really big, it's still extremely small, but the big house as an idea. So I wanted to start with that because this big house for us became something of a thought. So if a big house manages to, I would say, take on itself a certain set of ideas of publicness, what, and that of course you can only investigate through the projects themselves, what are its features? So we leave Bahrain and we move to Belgium. And we arrive here. This is another of these large cities. Again, it's not particularly attractive. Now, it's an extremely attractive place for the people who live there. What you see, the grain, so to speak, of these buildings is very particular. They're all in a way big houses, big villas for rich people who live in this part of Belgium, close to Ghent. It's called Sint Maartenslatem. Because, of course, as you can imagine, there's lots of green. That's attractive. But also they pay hardly any taxes. So very low taxes, lots of green, enormous houses, rich people. How it works a bit. So, of course, the disadvantage of the situation is, so they tried forever to build a library. There was a small library. Actually, here's a school. Here there's kind of a small library, but very, in a way, not functioning, little transformed building. They wanted the library, a real, city library of this small city. But they didn't manage because they didn't have the money. No taxes, no money, no library. So voilà. But so after 12, 13, 14 years of negotiation and trying to find, and actually that circle is wrong when it should be here, but okay, it doesn't matter. They came to a conclusion that maybe it was interesting, you see it here, right? That to make a building which would incorporate a couple of classrooms for that school. Thematic classrooms. Maybe a refectory for that school. It's a school for very small kids until, I think it's only until 7, like a big kindergarten. And then, of course, that library as an idea. So it's a competition. We won the competition on that site. And we proposed this very simple circular figure. This figure which somehow we felt should have a pitched roof, as you see here, very much like the houses around, but because of its circle, it would be radically different, as you can see, right? You cut, the circle of this saddle roof, and all of a sudden, it has a very peculiar appearance. And then we thought it was important, and here in this early collage, what you see in a way a closed wall with only a set of openings. The openings start here on the side, and then they go further down here in relationship with the school, because that relationship we thought was important. When the kids eat, they see their school. But in a way, when you're here on the street, there's nothing. There's only that, it's like a door, and this view on this court, which of course for us was key. The court, a kind of a garden of the library. So also, a very simple figure. These library shelves supposed to carry the roof. The library shelves are the building. The court is inscribed. You see that here. And then almost like a kind of a quarter pizza, as you see here. That's this refectory related to the school. So you see here these openings. You start here, is the door, the entrance to the library, and then gradually these other openings which are much more related to this particular shared space, this quarter pizza, as I just called it. You see the square somehow inscribed in the circle, of which half is the court. You see that the circle itself is in a way a big shelf system, and the library itself, a wooden structure, which is where all the books are. And that then is interrupted up to a point, but not really, because in a way the structure continues. It's also the same shelf system by the space, which is in the day, lunchtime, used by the school. It makes also, as you see, these two triangular spaces for the librarian and the toilets and so forth. But at the same time, in the evening, it's a space, these big tables, they can fold, and it becomes a shared, like say, cultural center-like space for poetry readings, especially event things in the city. What's interesting somehow, or which we thought was kind of funny, is that after all these negotiations, this cohabitation was fundamental, the kids and the people in the library. But at the same time, there was this extreme fear that certain people, let's say, would hang out in the library looking at the kids, so they couldn't see each other. So they're there, but they're never really visible, as you can imagine. So this kind of quarter pizza does not touch the court, because, otherwise, well, what would people look at while so-called reading books? Anyhow, people get paranoid nowadays. So here is the floor above. On the side, on top of, let's say, that shared space, there's these 2 extra or 3, almost 2.5 classrooms. There's even this kind of border for like some computer classes. You see that here as well in the section. And that's the building. It's extremely simple, yet in the end it turned out extremely difficult to build, because of course, only idiots, or perhaps us, think that you can make a shelf system as a building, because of course the precision of a bookshelf and the imprecision of buildings, it's a difficult match. But okay, we managed in the end, and the building got there. But before we see the building together, of course, many things pass, and I kind of like to show some of these things. I mean, not going too deep into that, but of course, it's always the question of like, what's the status of the building? When does something extremely private becomes public? I mean, everybody knows, of course, this alteration to the suburban house by Graham. Not to go that literal, but in a way to do the inverse. So to have, in a way, in the middle of that field, and this and a large city, which of course is not looking large at all, this place, which is probably the most public of the city, which is here, which is announced, but which is also to a certain extent protected. So the elements as you have them, I think I explained most of them already. I mean, how, I mean, the future that kind of garden finds its place, and the model as it was evolved. Matt Mulliken back again. He comes back from time to time. He's interesting for us in how he thinks architecture and object and sculpture and drawing, and how these things, in a sense, always I would say collapse, and of course also are dealing with the very private and the very public. So here, Rita McBride, actually, there were a couple of objects in this exhibition pictures I showed you in the beginning of A83, which are Rita's. I think Rita has always played a very important role for us, but I use her here rather as an illustration of this idea of this house, which is simply because of this one feature becomes particular. I see that the project was looking for its final form. And then Richard Van Let, an artist with whom we have worked a lot, and who is also involved deeply in this building, and then made that pedestal you just saw in the garden. So here you see it. So you see the school in the back. You see indeed no windows. You see the door. You see the court. Then you walk around a bit, then you see the door, really. You see one window which still belongs to, I see, but strictly spoken is the library. So where you see somehow a glimpse of what it contains. And then another door which is a kind of shortcut from the school. And there's a couple of windows there in the back. I think you'll see them from inside. So then this structure of the library. So you see this, and I'm so bad in this kind of thing, so I prefer to show it simply. So you see, this structure which carries, well, the building, which is the building structure, the shelves, and then of course the fact that it creates in some way a library which at first, and I have to be really honest, I mean, the competition we won, I guess, because the jury liked us very much. But the librarian, she did not like us at all. She was like, wow, what is this building? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's a circle. I mean, that was a big issue. And during the building, we were building it, and she came to these meetings, and she still did not like it. And then it was built, and then for some reason, I don't know, something happened, and the thing which happened was a very simple one. They started to fill back the books in the library, put the collection, and she realized she could actually stratify the collection horizontally. So she was totally, excited, because all of a sudden she could make, say, the kids' books in the lower parts, and then certain, say, novels of the parents higher, and then certain, thematize it in bands. So now the library works like this, which is very funny, because the kids are getting books here, and then the mother or the father is there, and so there's a very different idea set, not the typical library with the sections, because the sections are everywhere. So now, she does tours in the library and explains it's the most genius library in the world. So I'm very happy about that. So just also, there was this kind of intro which was very beautiful by Rosanna about, form and architecture and experiments in some way, even though these things look, I guess, also extremely conventional, what we do. For me, this is the most interesting, right? That you come with a figure which is not necessarily embraced from day one, because in a sense, I guess, we can know better, or we can guess better, and then you have to gradually convince people. Anyway, so you look here from the library into the garden, you see that weird pedestal, which could be used for events, which is this artist intervention by Richard. But he was involved in the whole library, but that's kind of his final signature. You see another of these kind of views in the library, and you see these aluminium panels and the aluminium door, which give access to the back, which are open in the evening when there's an event, and which of course entirely closed when the kids have their lunch. So here you see the kids' lunch. You see that these windows indeed relate to the back, and in a way make a complete different world with their folding tables and their particular folding chairs. The court again. And then very quickly how the building is built. I think I explained this already. And that's also why it became a plastered building, a render, as they call it here, I think. That is that we realized that we had to do so much effort to get it done. And then you have this wooden structure, you have the insulation. So yeah, then you just render it. Why on earth would you then still build a brick wall in front of it, or a false brick wall or whatever? I mean, it was a kind of an evident consequence of things. And now I must say also, and that's maybe silly to admit, but I mean, I guess many of you know this. I mean, there's these buildings which Toyo Ito designed in the late 70s, I think, which have actually these cement panels, but they look a bit rendered, and these curves. I think spending lots of time there and seeing this building many times, I mean, it had its implicit effect. So you see the court, you see how actually even the librarians lunch in the court. I see it again. I don't know why I showed this picture, but it doesn't matter. You see, of course, it's a very simple system. It's almost like a greenhouse system with the doors, in order to deal with the detailing, are closed panels, and then the rest is glass. You see that here too. And it's kind of funny, these aluminum doors, we like them very much. But when Fernando from El Croquis came to photograph it, he always looked the other way, because he said he hated the aluminum doors, and I still don't know why. We were so proud of them. But okay, I mean, so you cannot find them there. So that's why I keep on systematically showing you. But anyways, so here it's dark. It's still dark. You see somehow I mean, by the way, all these pictures are by Bas Prinsen, not just the gray pages you saw before. And then here it's well, the same place more or less in the day. And then you see indeed the back towards the school, and then the street. And we slowly walk away. We walk away from that library, which I believe is, I mean, where the Dar was announcing for us this house thought. It was there probably where it fully landed. It's the most maybe evident, almost cartoonish, I mean, translation of it. But of course, it never started with that thought. I think the thought grew to us while designing and building it. So the last one of the first third, yes, you're really aware of that, so a long way to go, is this one, which is also, I would say, is the third big house. Very different. At the same time, I think very related. It's a building, well, the large city, remember? Here the large city is Brussels. Here the building is here, next to the canal. It's a kind of north-south canal in Brussels. This is Anderlecht, which is one of these parts of Brussels. This is, I have to think, Saint-Gilles, yeah, Saint-Gilles, Saint-Gilles. And then this canal used to be a very important part of what was activities around it. I mean, different companies, and they have gradually been pushed out. I mean, that's not the only place in the world where this happened. And then there has also happened, I mean, and it has been pushed out and by this, these kind of big, enormous housing developments, often quite poorly built, expensively sold, or kind of mid-market. Also, this, meanwhile, has been completely filled. And for some reason, there has been that desire, I think, again, there's a kind of detour, right? That people start to think, oh, should we kick out all industry from the city? Is this a good idea? And then the question is, which industry could it still be? And so two beer brewers, had that thought, and they say, hey, wow, they could feel there was an advantage to be taken to convince the city that maybe they could make their young brewery, the Brussels Beer Project, to do it there. So it was a competition again. And the competition, in a way, started with a couple of elements in our head. And of course, it's always nice to show Venturi here, right? I mean, and it's a fantastic project. I mean, the National Football Hall of Fame. And it is always there, and Rocher is always somehow there, of course. But this is the reality of it. That is that this branding of this beer label. So I mean, it's a contemporary I mean, I have seen it in the States too, and I must admit, I see it because I have nothing with beer. I don't like beer, actually. But I mean, nevertheless, I see it. It's there. This idea, I mean, what is the beer brand exactly? So what they make is, and they are very good, of course, in what they do. They make sometimes a kind of a series which only lasts for half a year, and then some of them stay, and they use this color coding, these diagonal lines in two colors, as you see here. That's the labels of their bottles. And so when the competition came, and with these things here in the background, we thought, we need to make a big box because it's an industrial building. It's a brewery, it's nothing special really. It's like where you brew things, basic, cheap, no money. But how can you twist that? So we proposed in a way, in our head, we do a box, and we do a kind of strange roof, tent-like almost. Tent-like, a bit like this. I like very much this picture, this Pomona temple by Schinkel, which of course in itself is a nice little building, but then there's this weird tent, and this tent flips your whole perception of what it is. And then there's other buildings where we tested that, and Isaac Genskin is always great. I think we all can agree on that. I mean, anyhow, but also Genskin, I think this color is just there, and it is shamelessly colorful in some sense, which is cool. And so there's also this echo of the open box, but more important is tent, as I said. And so the thought, can you make a box very simple, where you will always see that roof, which of course is not textile at all. It will be corrugated aluminium, which it became, but you have this feeling that that's what it is about. So you see, I mean, how he then, started building it. You see also, and I mean, this picture is here, and you don't see it again. It's a pity in this presentation. But I mean, here you see that we were looking, I come back to that, like how this could become. I mean, that's not just simply a technical building, a brewery, a place. And, beer, Oktoberfest, and, beer garden. It all came there, it all got there. So we go to the plan. So, I mean, essentially it's a losange-shaped building, the dotted line. Then the black is the roof, which is a rectangle. Which is inclined and lays on the thing. It's kind of, it's on this hat situation, very interesting place. You see it here. And here again, these images, which were the competition images, very simple images. So with this roof, I go quick. Here you see it, how this enormous, in a way, colorful plate lays on that losange. You see it again. No. And then you see, of course, that it's kind of 9 meter and 9 meters. It's very big. It's hard to understand the scale, but I mean, and it has 4 big openings, always central to each side, which have not much to do with what's happening inside, as you can see. Then it has the same size as the perimeter, the height, so of where the roof is on its highest point. Then, and the space in between is filled with this very simple kind of greenhouse glass, with, of course, a very well-designed rhythm. And then you have these corrugated panels. You see they go from beam to beam, so they're stiff themselves. They have this aluminium frame, which gives this ambiguity of its thickness that we thought was very interesting, very important. You see here, and then it hangs over on both sides, but in the opposite direction. So it's extremely simple. And in a way, nothing fits. So that's the exciting part. So, I mean, everything which you put kind of seems totally logical, but then somehow nothing fits. So here, that's this roof and how it sticks out. It sticks over on one side, which makes this kind of a beer garden. It kind of marks in this context, which you see is completely different in scale, a very interesting point of that widening of the canal. And here you see the plan. So the plan, as I explained, 4 openings, in a way, 1 big garage door and 3, but they're the same size, and 3 big windows with here and there a door in there, a sliding door, a normal door, or no door at all in the top. In a sense, the structure of this perimeter has been built ultimately with this kind of sandwich panels, so concrete, insulation concrete, and then just in this kind of steel structure, you see these HEB profiles, you see them drawn here, like important. And then they're painted so that it seems to belong to that structure. And then the space itself is just populated by tables. The tables are steel tables, steel columns, steel profiles, but it was important that they were different. That you understood this, apart from the fact they're painted black, that steel has a round section. It's a very different idea. You see it here. You see a table column here. and you see, in a way, all the other columns and all the structure which is part of the perimeter. So how do you make clear what is the intention of each of the elements? What is the role they play in the family of elements of the building? So here you see it. Somewhere inside, you look through the window, you see the roof passing through. You see see some of the tables, there are higher tables, lower tables, they're all there. And the tables organize the production process, also organize the offices. But as I said, the tables, they're on their own. The tables have their own logic, and that logic does not follow, it has nothing to do with the logic of the building and its perimeter and its openings. So on the tables are these big vats, right? These vats for what is it called? The beer is, I forgot the name now, but that the whole process of fermentation. Exactly, thank you so much. So the fermentation happens in these vats. Then there's also the bottling below. All this can happen, and we somehow also discovered, it was interesting, that actually these fermentation vats, they are calculated in their capacity in cubic meter and not so much in height or in width. So we could play with these, we could place them. We have a kind of maximum scenario, which is now not yet done because the building, of course, wants to be able to grow. And there's like the 2/3 scenario, which is now currently constructed and is on the top table, and you see the other tables. In the side rooms are the stair or are kind of certain garbage solutions here, which are interesting. So in a sense, everything is used. Everything has the same detailing, which has this tiled floor on these tables. You need them very much there where, to clean very quickly when there's spill of beer and so forth. But also, they're used for the offices, and the offices inhabit, in a way, the same tables, just with a simple aluminium box on top of the box. So, see here, you see that. I don't have to explain to you that, of course, everything you see then, although simple, you have to kind of control this. You have to help them in designing this in some way, so that this, in a way, cheap building is, through lots of direction, can actually really happen. So you see that, you see the corrugation, which carries itself. You see the detailing, which for us is always very important. How do you build that? And you see a couple more pictures. So I wanted to say simply, it's a big house. Why? Because for us it was important that this production unit, something which is in the end just a company who makes beer, of course, who would like to be successful also in how it kind of sells its presence, its label, the quality of what it makes to the people around it. But that in a way, it's also an opportunity, and here with this overhanging roof on this side and this beer garden which he then made, to make some sort of spot, to make it, give it kind of as a gigantic object in the middle of the rest of that large city field, so to speak, and to give it meaning, to turn it into a place. And what you actually start to see, and that's quite radical, to be honest, is that building now is starting to transform this whole neighborhood. So even though it's a building which is as technical as you see it here, it's also a building which makes city, or which makes a certain moment of intimacy, so there in the back, and which is a building for the large city, as we hope the big houses can be. But okay, we move on. The big house. So the big house, of course, and that I think counts for every big house we try to design, even though we never know when we do, it should be robust, right? It should be robust in so much that it should be something which is able to, to have a loose relationship with how it's used, to be somehow able to take in and to survive. That's some sort of robustness. Robustness very much also a natural idea. Not 100% efficiency, but somehow it's like a photosynthesis to a certain extent. Not 100% efficient, but in some way efficient enough and working in such a way that it's made for the long haul, for long survival. At the same time, with robustness, you connect a certain, brutality, I would say, which we find interesting, because somehow with that robustness comes a certain, basic, brutal, simple behavior. So here, probably the easiest way to illustrate robustness is this project. It's an office building, as you can see here, which in fact already existed before we did the project, which is funny. I mean, we didn't do the office building. There was an office building before, and there is an office building now, and it's the same office building, really. So that's the building. It was there. Yeah? There's just a rectangle on top of it, but there was always there, that office building. It just looked slightly different. It looked like this, and it had plenty of problems. It was built in the 1960s or 67, something like that. As you can see on the picture, of course, it was like one gigantic thermal bridge. I mean, the windows are put in, the cores are on the side. I mean, there was a big, big problem. And it happens now to be the office of the province. So in a way, a very public building, a building which people would visit to arrange certain things, to have difficult conversations about finances, about taxes, about even about family kind of violence. So I mean, in a sense, a pretty particular kind of province kind of building. So building of the province. And so they were quite convinced. Either they asked us to do a study what to do with it, and initially we thought we tried to transform it. It looked very expensive. We did some studies, and we initially advised them actually to tear it down and to make something else, something maybe more intelligent. But then we actually figured that while doing that, one could not rebuild an office building there anymore, because the kind of the zoning had changed. And so that was a big problem, because they wanted to keep their building there. So we said we went for the second best option, which was in a sense to keep it. I mean, today you would say that was probably the best option. I understand, but at that time the difference between keeping and rebuilding a new building was so big, I mean, in terms of budget, that it was a crazy decision. And you will see also to a certain extent. So we had to keep it. So what we did, in a way, that's the plan of the building you just saw. And we took away these cores. We simplified. We moved the cores inside. We kept the structure like this. And then we decided to build, you see it already coming there with the mock-up, a building around it. And this building we build around it is it's almost Flintstones-like in its proportions. So it's enormous, these objects. They're made out of prefabricated concrete panels. And everything you see is only ducts. This is only air ducts. There's a new air machine, on top. See that here. And they're all connected with that. All ducts are used. It's really kind of particular. And as you understand, they all have slightly different dimensions, because the windows change and the plate sticks either out a lot or not. It's always perforated, and that has been calculated carefully. So that has a lot to do, of course, with trying in a simple, non-mechanic way to minimize solar intake, to kind of level out and say have maximum energy and minimum waste. So to turn this building into a zero energy building, I would say a little bit even ahead of its time, because we already finished it 8-9 years ago. So good, you see it here. You see these columns, which are in fact not columns and carry themselves. You see the structure, which is the structure of the building, which is here in white, the stair, and then this machine room on top. And here you see it built, right? So yeah, the funny thing is, if I show this project to many people, they just think it's a new building, but it's not true. And you can see it somehow. You'll see it on pictures afterwards, but the columns of the existing building have nothing to do with the new system of ducts, which look like columns. So the plates are very thin, are all perforated, and sometimes, only sometimes, we turn them into terraces, because it wasn't necessary to have all these terraces. And we liked very much that when you're on the terrace, you have the feeling you enter an almost inaccessible part of the building. So you see it here, you see it from below, you see it here, and you see we turned one of these ducts like this to make clear to everybody they are not structural. We thought it was, at the same time, it of course indicates the entrance. So you park your bike and you enter the building. You enter the building in this zone. You enter it there. So we asked also Rita McBride, I mentioned her before, to do an artwork, and she came with this event, which is actually, many ducts together, I guess, but as a sculpture, which fits remarkably well in the entrance hall. And then here you see, in a sense, this logic, right? You see the structure, which is here painted white, the real structure. You see this new, in a way, pseudo structure. You see the plates with all these holes, and you see the facade which is in between the old and the new. You see it here again. You see how air in and air out. You see the detail of that. So you see the plate, sometimes the railing, the new facade, which is here, the old structure, and then this panel with the in and outlet, and then sometimes, as I said, the railing and the perforation. So here's when you stand on one of these terraces. I mean, it was an absurdity, but we wanted these holes to be exactly the same if you look from below, so we had to find a trick. So in the way you put the glass, that, I mean, in a sense from below you have no clue. And then here you look at, for example, this. It's even a little bit claustrophobic, I have to say, when you're there. It's strange. Nice. So that's the building, really. A robust building. See? Very robust. Now, imagine this robustness, this in a way building which is there and stands there with you and says, and it's very, very true for that building, I'm a public building. I'm a building of the province, come to me, come to my offices. Here I am, next to its immediate context. So this thought we carry it with us here in the next building. It's a crematorium. Crematorium, we all know what a crematorium is. I think in Belgium, I don't even think we were amongst the quickest on that, I would say, development. But in Belgium, I think now it's 75 or even more % of people who die are cremated. And that's funny because, well, it's not funny at all, of course, to be cremated or to die. But I mean, that was really not true 30 years ago. I mean, 30 years ago was maybe 30%, 25, 30%. And in a generation, it moved from a country which was essentially burying its people to a country which is cremating. And that's a big shift because you can imagine people die, sadly, always sadly. There's a service. I mean, a service in a place. I mean, we still think the era of the big churches, or maybe then consciously not that church or not that religious building, then where else? But now, in a sense, this whole, I would say, this last episode, very important moment, is replaced by buildings which are built anew and are, in a sense, supposed to be extremely efficient. Because the crematoria are taught, often, by the way, run by people who are simply companies in Europe, also in Belgium. And the thought is, minimum movement, quick. How many bodies can we cremate in the shortest possible time? It's quite something. So, wow. So competition for that. Here, the large city, because it's not because we're part 2 that the large city is gone. The large city is still there. The large city also looks like that. It's like the polders, Ostende. It's a city next to the sea. It's not the beautiful polders with Aron here you find in Holland, of course, but they're close. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a little bit less organized in Belgium. Everything is always a bit less organized in Belgium. And so here. And a kind of crazy idea of that's the site, but it's not so important. Crazy idea of the city and even the province there, that they want to plant plenty of trees on these polders, which is rather odd. I mean, they want to turn the polders into a forest. I mean, as if the polders is not nature enough, I mean, in a sense. So that was also part of the competition entry, that it had to be part of that newly projected forest. So we worked together with Bas Smets, a landscape designer with who we often work. And actually we came to this proposal that rather than making kind of this random forest, if it had to then all be trees, then that make a whole set of parallel trees, like this rabat structure, which is how they typically put trees in the polders. They put them a little bit higher so that the root is a bit out of the water, so the water is around it. You structure the polder, and so we thought like that. You arrive like this. You come. So we put the building very deep on the site. The site was this. So you have a kind of mise en scène of many trees, a kind of layers and layers and layers, a kind of a shadow play in some sense. So that was the thinking. So you see them appearing in the early models. You see them. You see this. It's important. I come back to that. This mullican. It's here, but it's in a way anticipating the idea of displaying that, so to speak. But so there was that, and the thought that we wanted to make a compact building. which was also somehow dealing with this idea of landscape. Approaching the building, a roof was very quickly there. But then what kind of roof? And also the desire, the very explicit desire that one should not see what happens in it. So, I mean, there's a rule there that you cannot see smoke in a crematorium, you cannot see a chimney of a crematorium, even though, of course, these things you need to cremate people, of course. So what we came up with was very simple. We said in this artificially built landscape, these trees, we built an artificially built piece of nature, a still life, a natuurmort. So we tilt the roof, we make this 50 by 50 meter roof as a composition, as a still life. And on that composition, everything happens, but you never quite understand what happens. Again, Richard Vennet, the artist, is involved. So we start to make what you see there. And you say, in a way, talking about robustness, the building is that 50 by 50 roof with its columns, the plate, the table you see when you get closer to it. And then on the back, there's a plate hanging, which kind of protects the people here who do this technical cremation and arrive with their hearses. Okay. I mean, of course, the building has a plan, an important plan for us, but the most important here in my robustness is this. So how, and then you sequence this relationship with that landscape in that building, but that very beautiful. I mean, actually, the joke is this is a picture which I found in the monography on Luigi Fontana. I think the picture is that big, very small. It's a footnote, I think, in the text somehow, and you look it up and stuff. I never found anything else, but that's not important. I mean, for us, it was an important, reference point. This kind of roof, I guess it was an entry he made for the Montreal World Expo or something. But you see, Fontana, the dots, the objects, and wow, the whole thing is sculpture, the whole thing is still life. This, let's see. So voila. So this was the thinking. This is how it got built. Well, you see, it's the same, actually. So Bas took that picture. The landscape is slow. I mean, the landscape is totally not there yet. Not now, a bit more, you will see that. But when Bas took these first set of pictures, I mean, yeah, it was still the kind of pseudo wilderness. We were with lots of fights with the local politicians about the landscape, actually. They did not like our take on their forest, as you can imagine. So this is the plan. I go very quickly through it. Most important is you arrive in the lowest point. There's a whole set of parallel spaces, which are always divided through walls. Thicker, thinner walls, you can see them. Sometimes a wall which ate something, a bit like Saint-Exupéry, the elephant, and the snake and the elephant here. But there are walls, and you will see that the walls have always rhythms of doors, always the same, always different, each of these. So this is slightly different from this. They become bigger because the building, as you saw already on the view, gets higher. So this is very high, this is very low, 2 meter 10 or so, very low. So when you arrive, it's very intimate. I mean, then these families or friends gather there or there, then they go through this wall in the service, they go out, they're immediately pushed out. I mean, this is the family room on both sides where people wait before the service starts, a group related to the dead person. And then after the condolences, people are immediately pushed out under the roof, protected, because they need oxygen. People, I mean, are very, very sad mode. I mean, they're very emotional. So very interesting. In a way, there's just spaces which seem to have no logic, but in a way, everything is strangely logical. And then there's this double wall, and here we double the wall because this is, this is the ovens. This is all the machines to clean the air, and these machines, not insulated. There, you see. So that's how it works. Even to the point that all the heat from here is used to heat this, which is a strange idea. But it's a logical idea. But if I tell this to people are, oh wow, that's odd. Well, we think ecology. So this is the model. This is the model without roof. This is the building. So everything is said, really. I mean, this roof with the columns, these objects of which you don't really know what they do, these parallel walls, and in between the walls, everything which we had to solve is this corrugated aluminium, like curtains. You see them, see them here, the entrance, these low doors. You see that space? where you arrive, there's these black objects which you see the two different already kinds of openings, but always in this rhythm. Sometimes benches, double doors, toilets, entrances. You see these curtains, right? Which are not curtains, they're this corrugated aluminium. You see this wall, I didn't talk much about it. I mean, we developed this with Richard. It's interesting because, remember what that place has to be. So Richard developed this kind of niche, almost like a chapel, in this wall, which is this kind of wedge-shaped wall, you saw it, which can open like that. So when people leave for their condolences, they leave here and the wall is open, so there's more space. When the service is not yet starting, it folds and they're themselves, the group of people who organize the cremation in the back, and they talk. So all these things here, detail. I mean, the fixed furniture here is enormous air boost, air inlets. There's lots of air, lots of oxygen during the service. You see that here, and so we designed them like that. They're just there. They're always there. Everything is always there. That's the second room, very similar but very different opening. And that's that wall, as I mentioned, with this enormous hinge, you see. Okay, the details of that curtain. And the back, the ovens, with the pink wall next to the ovens. And then outside that pink wall, where the hearses arrive, with the coffins of what they call technical cremations, because it's really an industry. So what happens? People in the front, they gather and they wait for the service of their beloved one. And in the back already a hearse drives in with maybe a dead body in a coffin, which there was a service still in a church. And then they do this technical cremation. Nobody's there. And so all this, it's organized like a big box, like an industry, which is, again, fascinating. How can you dignify with form and only form? The back. So you see the back is completely open. It's even just perforated outside space, essentially. The other side, you see the roof, the sides, and you see it in the front. So Bas's project gradually starting to get shape, Bas Smets. Not anymore the very long curve. Actually, that was a fight we lost against the local Green Party, which is very strange, because he wanted to plant many trees, and the Green Party was against. Sometimes it's odd, the world. I mean, there's much worse things nowadays, but I mean, nevertheless, strange. So you think they're your friends, but then they're not your friends. Okay. The third robust building, is this one. So then we are 2/3, so don't worry. No worry. We have time, I guess. So the last robust, everything is robust, but the last illustration. So here, it's a project you see these numbers. This is a fairly recent project, 301. It's a project which, we started not even that long ago, maybe 4 years ago, 3.5. Again, this same large city, but another one, Antwerp. It's Antwerp, very beautiful city. I'm from Ghent originally. I live in Brussels, so people from Ghent have an ambivalence towards Antwerp, but it's okay, beautiful. And then you see this zone here. This was all. There's a Scheldt, a big river. There's a kind of an industry, a kind of harbor industry which moves north, and these parts which gradually are occupied by housing. There's a museum here, the Mas Museum by Nutling Sliedijk. It's a beautiful building. I like it also because I worked long with Willem-Jan and Michiel. Okay, I mentioned it for that reason, perhaps. And then here, this is a zone, an area, which used to be a slaughterhouse complex. You will see that. You zoom in, you see these two buildings. One I made white, the other one, same building. Little houses around it, very, very poor workers' houses. An open area of other boxes, other, in a way, semi-industry, storage, slaughterhouse, food-related stuff, which was there because close to the water. But all this will change. The highway, enormous highway there, the ring around Antwerp, they will put it all underground. They're busy with that now. So a developer thought, interesting. This is a chance, right? A new neighborhood. We did not design the neighborhood. It's a master plan by the Smet Vermeulen, interesting office in Belgium. very, 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 I would say, very honest people, very, very intense people. Impressive. And so they made this development here. They said, okay, these, at least part of the halls, at least this hall should stay, they suggested. Maybe the other one, 2/3. Then new buildings, housing. We are doing a housing project there as well. And then, but okay, you can imagine. So the thinking is, how on earth do you get people there, right? I mean, okay, you can build houses, but what's the neighborhood? What is it about? So, I mean, that building, not exactly how it was when we found it, already cleaned up here a little bit. That building was at least partly the key. Why? You see these two buildings, the lower and the higher one, left and right, because turning this into a school, a part of this kind of university, sprawling university campus, this university, right, AP, high school, university in the new Bologna logics of Europe, advanced studies, laboratory buildings, chemistry, stuff like that, biology. What about it? So long story short, it happened. So there was this idea that that building and its transformation would do something. We forget. I mean, Lina Bobari is fantastic, but you cannot compete with that. Okay, but and okay, she cannot compete with Cordoba. But the idea that you do a gesture and this changes, and you maybe do another gesture, and the rest is maybe already there. A robustness. It was there already, maybe. So that's the thing. So here you see the plan, very simple. I think you'll see it again, but essentially a ground floor full of classrooms, and by introducing a table, a very big table as big as the building, a top floor with laboratories, and then a building next to it. So that's the thought. So this ground floor, the table here, and you'll see it a bit better, but why that? Because we thought this horizontality, this enormity of that building, what you have to try is to keep that. Because if indeed one keeps the building, if indeed it's better to keep than to destroy, it's probably also because you're able to build a typology you can't build if you would build from scratch, because it has heights, it has lights, it has things which nobody would accept if you do it as a proposal. So here, we saw that. What we realized was that the lower part were infilled, so we started to take them all out. That part of the facade was hanging, so we kept it hanging. That in a way we had to do a new facade here, so we had to maybe cut a little bit these columns on the edge. And that these sheds were absolutely fantastic. So that's what we kept. You see it here. That's the moment where we started to really clean it up. We put in that table, as I just said. The top floor, we try to see, is it possible to experience that space maximum effect? And the ground floor with an entire opened facade, and because it was an infill, sometimes glass, sometimes not, sometimes bricks, you have almost like a donut, a ring of classrooms and entrance halls on both sides, and a slightly darker zone in the middle, as you see here. The building next to it, we cut out this half circle because it was a beautiful tree, you see. And voila. So this is it in a way, almost a slight twist, but then of course an extreme twist. And then you see it here very well. We decided to perforate the top space, the top facade, like these 3 rows of openings, which work as ventilation openings on the lower space. So it does not fit, as you see, the table with that facade. So this is still below that table, and the other 2 are to give reference on the top floors, not light enough. The table with the table on the table for machines. The ground floor plan, I already mentioned it, you saw it before. The cutting of these holes. The holes from the outside. And then, okay, you see the building next to it, which steps. So this is the building built. They moved in about a year ago, I think in September last year. Yeah, September, October. So this is this new facade for which we had to cut the columns a little bit. This is hanging. These are sometimes ventilation, sometimes false windows, sometimes the holes are always there. And then somehow this building is, you cannot see it here well, but I think the next picture does. The space between the columns, that unit, we took as a measurement for these windows. And so we made the whole building. You see it here, you see it better, I think. You see, from here to here, becomes from here to there. That's that window. And somehow they relate like that. They become family members. Then the sheds, everything else, of course, cleaned up. Inside, we do the same glass facades and outside, so as to have that total horizontality, see-through. You see it here. There's these stairs. you'll start to look up, look further up, and you have all the machines. Everything is just there. I was in the Richard Labs just earlier, and of course it's much more beautiful. Richard's. I mean, it's a bit sad. It's all offices now, but I mean, at least you have this idea. I mean, of everything just there, like this, or like that. Robust, right? So, okay, closing this chapter here. I think a desire to use what's there, but to radically surpass it, and to make a building which never existed before, but at the same time you're confused because you thought, but I know this building. Now, the building here is a far brother or sister of the next one. So we enter the field, the last three projects before it's midnight. The field, and it was mentioned by Rosanna, and it was an important project for us. The field came, I think, not first, but more recently when we started to reflect upon what we were actually doing, came through this project, which is the Swiss Radio and Television headquarters in Lausanne. It's a competition we won 10 years ago, and I think 11 even. Well, a long time ago. But we only are about to finish now. It's almost ready. And you see the sheds, right? We just saw the sheds before. You see the spaces, the 2 floors in some sense. And it's odd, because I think that building is somehow the ancestor, can you imagine, of the building just before. Whereas in a sense, historically, you could say the building I just showed is older. Now, let's enter the field. So everybody knows this building. Beautiful, beautiful field, perhaps. The Learning Center by Sejima Nishizawa Sana. I think it's a fantastic building. Amazing project. Then you have the campus of EPFL, and campus here of UNIL. And then what they call in French, Swiss French, it's a French-speaking part of Switzerland, Lausanne, pavillionaire, actually just suburbia, but have a better word for it. And then you have the lake, and then you have the mountains, but the mountains is France. Never forget that. So here we go. And here you see in a way the suggestion, I mean, what became the project. So it was a competition, long competition. As I said, started 11.5 years ago. We won it 10.5 years ago. It was a 9-10 month competition for that lot. At the time, only this existed. Meanwhile, there's this other, I think, Kengo Kuma building under one roof. Okay. And then here there's a strange building, an existing building, which was immediately part of the context. It was there. And then, as I said, this kind of very strange, very low, but very dense campus of EPFL, and the more campus-like campus of the UNIL, the humanities, let's say, and the Polytechnic School and the humanities. And so, in a sense, the need, desire, and so that's the pitch we made. Can you make a building here? Not for the school, because it's radio and television, so for people who have nothing with the school, but would like to have something with the school, would like to belong to the school, would be part of the campus. And can you make something which somehow belongs to that campus, but at the same time disconnects where it needs to disconnect, perhaps there where it makes its content. So you could say a building which wants to be campus-like, and this set of blocks, and field-like. So okay, plenty of thoughts. I was talking about Aldo and Hanni van Eyck. Meanwhile, we were very much busy with their later work, which I must say I like a lot. This Aztec complex is fantastic. But okay, their references, they were certainly not there when we started, because when we started, we made this. This was actually our application, I remember very well. So we said, okay, imagine you take the typewriter plan of Branzi, the non-stop plan, Branzi with the typewriter, and you cut it to fit in the site, fit that weird building, and then you cut the edges too, because you don't want this radical stop, and it's not non-stop, and it's stop. So let's not stop the non-stop, and we do like this. And so we started in this competition. You see the dates, right? 2014, you see here, early versions in the early phase of the competition. It was a 3-stage competition. So where we felt this figure, later people started to see it as an ear shape, with Baldassare ear shape, but it was a bit by accident, really. how then you would have that shape and you have the other figures. So Baldassare, well, he's there, right? So how do you organize space with, in a way, two spatial ideas? A box idea and a field idea. In French, they say émergence, because it's a bit higher, this the emerging objects, and this champ, the field, really. So 2014, still you see that 14, 15, that's what happened. So these objects are there, and of course they start to become, I would dare almost to say, almost by accident, the inverse of the learning center. Not the circular figures out of the rectangular figure, but the inverse. Okay. This, I think, is for us was a very important image. So this Baldassare kind of work where he inserts almost Malevich, like, I mean, the beautiful white square of Malevich which hangs in the MoMA. Well, he literally takes that same figure, he puts it on top of a scene, and the scene is under tension. So, that idea. So what happens when you do this? So, okay, more of it. First collages, I skipped this a bit. I think this is important for us, Can you make an urbanity which is field, made out of nothing but furniture? And can you make an urbanity which is, only buildings, right? The Campo Marzio. And can you make it at the same time? So, okay, these were the collages, the final collages of the competition. This, the plan, actually, not of the competition, but as we have now been building it. So 4 figures in campus enters, there's restaurant, there's no furniture, unfortunately, drawn here, there should be plenty. There's trucks here driving around. I can come back to that, but essentially the idea is, and I mean, they have already been working with that, the Swiss Radio and Television, is that these recording studios, the big studios, they don't have their own kind of post-production units anymore. No, these are all placed in trucks, like Archigram, plug-in trucks. They park there. They are used during the process of recording an event. They might be here to be repaired or to be cleaned. They drive around, they park here around, and almost like a fire station. They go to an event, they come back. I mean, so this technology changes so fast that it makes no sense to build it in a space. So, but the space itself is, of course, still the space, the music space, the bigger studio, and so forth. Then these other, I mean, in a way, you see 2 typologies, 2 simple boxes with kind of technical sides, both sides, and then total open plan, actually. You don't see that here very well, but these walls are totally infilled, can be taken out. And 2 more conventional buildings with cores. In between a foyer, you can enter from the campus. And on top, this field. And the field is not just carried by these boxes and these dotted lines, which are the Warren trusses, but also, in a way, like in Baldassari's, interrupted by it, put under pressure, and they act really very much as addresses. So all these windows are studios, post-production studios, and so forth. You see them here, bigger, smaller studios, and work like addresses, like shop windows in that city. So the sections, the collages, further collages of the competition. So it explains this idea, the structure, entering from campus, belonging to campus, in the night, in the day. The back, which is this, this tarmac where also a truck can drive around, start, stock, storage, but also recording. A box in one of these boxes, and the field where people work. So this is the building, almost ready, as you see. It opens in November, and you see that it is somehow what I hope we promised. But what's interesting for us is that it's a building which it houses media. So you have to imagine, if something radically changed in the last 11 years is media, I don't know, I guess it's for me, not alone for me, it's also for you. I mean, you look at the news. Maybe you still listened to the radio 10 years ago or looked at television. Now you take your app on your phone, Times app, whatever. I mean, they make little movies, even TikTok and all kind of other things. But even for people who are a bit more conventional media consumers, so to speak, half of their articles are videoed or something. So this whole idea that you make radio there and television there, no, you make content. And you need to make buildings which allow for that content. So in that sense, the wrong machine. In that sense, I mean, and I go back for 1 second to that plan. the thinking happens here somewhere, and the production happens if it has to be protected in these boxes, and if not, outside of these boxes. And that we could maintain in these 10 years of endless evolution of the building, and it started and it stopped, and permits, and I don't know what, and that's fascinating. So that, yeah, I mean, it can house basically anything. So we go back, we here. It's not entirely finished. You see that this ceiling still needs to be placed. But okay, it gives an idea. You see also how you will then enter the landscape they're now making. You will be able to enter here. There will be the restaurant there, in fact. And so you will walk under it with these entrances to that restaurant. Okay, as I said, no ceiling yet. You can go through these big kind of facades. Now here, very badly photographed with all this reflection. And you enter, and that's this big stair, which goes up. I mean, this is this foyer. You will see then two these trucks, which you now cannot see. You walk up, and that's more finished already. I mean, and these are also slightly more recent pictures, but I mean, it made no sense to photograph downstairs 3 weeks ago. Actually, apart from the protection of the carpet, it's all there. There are also these objects which are really urban design, you know, like you put these objects in there. You have these tables I didn't talk about in these mezzanines, which have some meeting rooms. You have these addresses there. You have all these endless amount of warren trusses, which somehow hold the building, which of course, I mean, creates a kind of a very weird zoning. So what you see is what you get: the sheds, the installations, even the gutter, the addresses, the doors of the emergence of the boxes. You walk here in one. You have these big staircases in each of these, which you can use as a shortcut the moment you're there. You see here, that's one of these shops, not ready yet, you understand? But this is exactly what you will see. They will be recording radio, and the other people will be working. You'll pass by. So what is the radio? Like in the city. You look outside, you have the learning center, of course. You see here, one of these. I mean, it shows always more or less the same condition, you can understand. And you look out to the lake a little bit, you see there. And you look out again, and that's kind of weird foot of that strange building which made that cut. And back, I see that. Okay, so the field, quickly, don't worry. We move to Belgium, back from Switzerland, a little bit less exotic, but I like it in its echo. You see that strange corner, you see that hovering field, you see that space for work. Well, we move here, and you see that. It's a satellite factory. I mean, yeah, then they had this silly idea to call it the mega factory, which, I mean, whatever. But, there was an existing building here and a new building, as you can see there. This is Charleroi. We made recently a little book about it called The Large City. It's a very strange place, Charleroi. It's a place remnant of, I would say, destructive modernism. I'm very interested in modernism, the modern project, it has been mentioned. But I mean, and when we were writing or studying also with the students in Mendrisio about this condition, we were working on Charleroi, we were fascinated by just this, right? I mean, this is this kind of, this excavating, landscape transforming modernity, coal, steel, and all these hills you see are artificial. There's slag heaps. But since the whole production has been stopping for now more than 65, I think almost 70 years, and nobody touched them anymore, they become some sort of nature. It's very strange. You walk there, and if you don't know, you think, oh, they have hills in Charleroi. But no, they're all fake in a sense. They're all there. And they become now new places for this extreme sports, trail run, all this stuff. People go there for that. It's fascinating. So it's a place which has all these remnants, everything accumulated, kind of Ungers-like, all these objects are there. Beautiful sometimes less so. All these pieces of nature are there. So all of this is there. And so they had a mayor, a fantastic mayor, very enlightened person, who said, we need to see this as a positive project. He wrote a book, actually, La Vie Large. It's the French-speaking part of Belgium, The Large Life. And it was in a way, because he's a politician, he's head of the Socialist Party, and he wanted to argue for a version of sharing which is not forgetting about yourself. Interesting. But I think it was also somehow a metaphor for that place. So we kind of twisted it and we called that research the large city. Remember, I mention it all the time. It was kind of the thought, the most extreme version of the large city. Everything, all at once, everywhere, right? So started to work with that. A bit of Balz, why not? So then we were asked by this mayor somehow through his head of urbanism if we did not want to think of designing a new building for what was a startup at first from the university, nearby university, Louvain-la-Neuve, and became very quickly quite a company, 20 people, 30 people, 300 people, 800 people, making satellites. I think they're number 2 in Europe. Can you imagine? In no time. And so what to do in this landscape where everything is enormous and useless and weird at the same time? So, well, the only thing we absolutely wanted to do, and you see it here, that little thing, there was one little building. Oh, where is that building? I can show it immediately. That one here. It's not exactly Kevin Roach, but it has some of its echoes. This type of what is it? John Deere era, Kevin Roach. This kind of a curtain steel type of building, very small. And of course, the first thing was, we demolish the building, build an office, and then we do another hall and that was the thinking. And we said, so can't we keep that building, which was in a very bad state? And you cannot renovate it because it's all exoskeleton, forget it. So we said, okay, we take even more out and we keep the structure, curtain steel, and we turn it into a garage, right? The garage, because otherwise they would have parked the cars everywhere there where there still are trees. That's a pity. So, okay, that is the garage. And then on the other side, we move the offices, so we cannot put the offices there. We put them on top of the white hall, the big clean hall here, where they make satellites. And that's the gesture. And then you make a bridge between them. Essentially, that's the project. So 2, 3 ideas. So this field, remember? We are in the field section. The field. That's the field. That's it, really. The garage, the bridge. So this big figure is on top of that box. It's like 180 meter on 120 meter building. It's for Belgian standards, a big building. Maybe not for American standards, but okay. And then it has this very simple materiality, this corrugation, perforated where the offices are, and then it has these light wells. You see them there. They had many light wells at that moment of the project. They have a bit less light wells now, but still, I think, very coherent. So we had even light wells into the white box, into the clean room. That we had to kick out because they thought that was not a good idea. Okay, fine. But it still has the others, as you can see them here. This is the image. So just an enormous object, really. An object which, in its sheer size, tries to deal with the enormity of everything which surrounding it, and and it inhabits that, on the top, as one big field. So you come there, park your car, go there, pass it, look down into the clean room potentially, have the entrance there, and have the offices itself. So the field here translated maybe a little bit like the beer project, in its most simple, cheap also in a sense, elementary version. So the building, the bridge to the building, the bridge between the building and the garage, the building in context. You see all these objects there, everything there, just, what does it mean? And here it is under construction. Okay, the last field project. The last field project is a questionable field, maybe. It's a very long building. Is that a field? Actually, it's the question we are working on with the students this semester in Mendrisio. So what are the when is what? I don't know. Now, this is an architecture school. It's here in Liège. It's a competition we won about 2 years ago, I think, 2.5. Liège is an interesting place because it has many layers, and the last layer from the 1950s is in a way very present. You don't see it on this image, but apart from all its other layers you have in the 1950s, they built plenty of not so great, quite cheap modernist towers, housing towers next to the river. which were like part of this kind of 1950s, modernist Liège. But of course, many parts don't have it, and they became a little bit unpopular, you could say. The architecture school has always been here, or at least in the last 5 or 10 years here, which is a former caserne, military barrack in a sense. But that's only half the story, because these buildings were used by the military for their housing and so forth. You see them here, these buildings like that, are now all art school below, and architecture, which is just this building here. I'll show it better in the plan here. So art school, architecture, current situation. And then there's this big hall here, which is called the manège, because it was a former horse stables, and it turned into some sort of cultural center. There's a big court here. And there's a certain vibe of being historical, but it's fake in a sense, because it's of course historical, but it's many, many more layers than one would think. This is a very old building from the 17th century. All the other buildings have endlessly been rebuilt. There was at a certain point, this is still the existing part of it, was a big monastery, all gone. They replaced, and now they have this context, where you can imagine. The question was, can you redesign what is the architecture faculty housing in these older looking buildings? How do you do that? What we found interesting is that where perhaps the most logical maneuver would have been to densify this part, because that's certainly all their buildings, that actually the whole square here belongs to the architecture faculty. So this is the art school, this is the manège, but the square is architecture faculty. Funny. So we proposed them to make a very long building, you see it here, appropriating that square. Say, look, we designed the square, and you have the square, and it's really your square, and through the square you negotiate with the art school, of course, it's nice. And in a way it gave us an alibi to make a very narrow, long building, like 90 meter, very narrow. And the argument was also, it was a building with just a wall, instead of columns and a window. Wall, very important to teach architecture, I believe. Tables, window. And then we put a core here. Actually, in the beginning, there were 2 cores, but you will see it evolved. We made 1 core much more intelligent, but the competition wasn't there. We took away that building here and made a kind of big, in a way, foyer hall, a kind of a multi-purpose, almost like a greenhouse-like structure, which also allows you to enter the faculty in the future like that, as a second, 2 entrances. So here you see that, the slab. You see that space in the back. There's still the 2 cores, but you will see the left core will disappear. And actually here you see the view where you see in a way already 1 core. It could have had the other one, but it's gradually smarter to concentrate. The back is just a wall, like a paper, you see? It has the heading of a paper, Faculty of Architecture. It has, and here it has this entrance, right? This greenhouse-like thing. And then these buildings. These are the collages of the competition. The relationship through its newly made kind of court with the oldest building on campus. And here, in a way, the fact that it's a very simple project. We thought it should add in architecture education, apart from, as I just mentioned, a wall and a window and a table, fundamental, so that people don't endlessly work on their computers and don't endlessly show on their screens, but actually, you try to, and then, people do what they want, of course. But also, and I think importantly, it tries to appropriate that space as a real space of exchange, of education. And also, perhaps, it tries to fill the gaps. Kelly, we all know him, this educational complex, fantastic, all his kind of real or imagined school experiences in this one insane sprawling model. But also, it brings back the Dom Communa, in a sense. Can you bring that figure back in architecture education? Can you question, maybe? Can you debate by building also that long building? That modern type, in the debate. Here. So here the model, one of the early models, the gesture, this. Some tests, the wall in the back. I think more or less, the more or less current plan. You see the core is now concentrated. Actually, these weird diagonals are gone, but this endlessly evolves. We took it away. But the type is there. The thick wall, which also works like a vertical chimney, important. the escape stairs on the side, the wider terrace, and then here and there a couple of entrances to the first floor, to the Belvedere. The ground floor here with this relationship and the newly organized existing buildings for other classrooms. And the typical floor. And we thought it was interesting in a kind of field obsession, so to speak, to make a building which had absolutely nothing fixed. It's just the back wall, the columns, the escape routes, and everything else is out. So of course you put in temporary walls, you divide it by 10, by 5, by 3, to be seen. We'll see. It has to be surviving a long time. That's the thought, right? So that's the section. That's the other section in the other direction where you see the middle floor works like a belvedere. I also, because the Manege building I mentioned had some windows, so we had to open up and we had to negotiate with them, like how can we have shared terraces? They agreed, so that was how we got out of it, which we like very much. And then here you see the models. So now we're in building permit phase. We're close to start. You see the images. You see, by the way, here remnants of that kind of modernist Liège I just mentioned. You see the current images as we communicated them with all the authorities on what we actually want to start to build. You see it here, and you see, kind of a field, a house also, perhaps a big house. Why? Because of course, I guess also like all of you are still here. A real student of architecture lives and works in the same spot, right? And forever. Well, you need a house, a dom commune. And so we thought it might be the appropriate typology. So we did typology, as I mentioned here, you see more and more. I'll about to say bye-bye with one last project. Bye-bye, architecture. But also bye-bye in a sense that, it's because perhaps if anything in these 3 episodes came to us in the last couple of years, it's also this endless reassessment of where we are, what do we do, how much architecture, and what's the gesture. And to illustrate that, this very little project, maybe closer to earlier projects we did, a project of rooms, one could say, but nevertheless also robust, also a big house, and dealing with its surrounding field. So here it's in Belgium, close to Leuven. You have an area which is prone to inundation. Here you can see that somehow. It shows. There's houses around, and an artist, a well-known artist in Belgium, who wanted to have his atelier there. So long discussion. He had acquired a house which had burned down, so he thought he had the right to actually, use that house, transform it, make a new house. He had to, because the house hardly existed anymore. And so, of course, he had a certain, I would say, power or a certain leverage, should I call it that way, because he is this well-known artist. And so somehow, together with us, he could convince the people, the authorities, to build his studio there, actually his second studio there, where he could, somehow disconnect, but at the same time, and that I find fascinating, I believe even much more part of our public realm, of the shared, of the figure, him who lives in that building. So that's the guy, that's the artist and his art. That's the ground floor, which doesn't reveal much because in fact it's the floor you cannot use. You will see that. That's the first floor, which is where he makes his atelier. As you notice, there's nothing in that house, it's just a space. The stair is hanging to it. These go up, but they're not inside. And that little stair allows you to actually enter that room. That's the top floor, which is, a place for temporary stay, so to speak. It's not really a house, but it's the same floor. It has 2 openings, 2 windows. It has 2 stairs which arrive, as you can see. That's the ground floor. The studio below, which is just a wooden box in that building, and then the top floor, and then the section. So it's, as I said, it's a place which can easily inundate. So the building is raised, and it's perforated, and it works there. It's almost standing like somewhere between a bunker and an ark. It has these 2 roofs, one which protects somehow in certain privacy. It's perforated on the left. On the other one, on the right, actually, allows him even to paint or to do whatever he wants to do when it rains, because he thought that was important. On this big site, I didn't mention that, but I mean, the site he gave back to the whole site. Actually, this whole thing is his site, everything. So he said, okay, this is public. I just need a house. And that house, then, as I said, has his roofs. Has no connection between the ground floor to the top floor, unless from the outside. Has, in a way, no connection with outside unless you bring the stair down. This is, I mean, the details. Actually, the building is almost ready, but I only show you here the images. It looks like this, very simple. Like a remnant of a house, somewhere lost in space, protected, and almost as a symbol, I would dare to think. A symbol also for our, I mean, dark times in our society, so that when everything goes wrong and the deluge is there, well, he might be the one who will survive. Thank you.
Take some questions, maybe just 2 or 3 because of time.
Oh, for me it's okay. You choose. Sorry,
Can you repeat that, sir? Sorry.
I didn't hear your question.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. How did you originally come upon the idea of perforation in your reuse projects? Or was it just simply natural?
Was it just?
Perforation, cutting holes in the existing.
But the last sentence, yeah.
Or was it just natural? Like, just.
Natural. Yeah, well, we have something with perforations, I think. You see it also in that last project. I don't know. I mean, I remember when we were in that hall, and the hall is very beautiful. I mean, it's obvious when you stand on the ground floor of the hall and you see how high it is, and you also see the cut below, and there's not yet a table in there, that you think this is good. But then you realize the moment you raise the floor that it feels claustrophobic. So it was really, it's kind of funny, to be honest, because we thought it was extremely important, these perforations. They're a very important part of how the building is read when you stand outside. I mean, it represents its transformation from a slaughterhouse into a school. People say, oh, wow. Huh? But then the truth is that when you're in these classrooms, they manage to hide so many of them simply by putting furniture in front. So, I think in reality it's less important than in our mind it was a starting point. So yes, I think it came natural. It came natural because we always or very often work with exactly these devices. It felt as if it was necessary. It turns out to be not that necessary.
Oh.
I'm happy they're there. Yeah. Yeah, but it's also, more recently, I think Rosanna can attest that, more recently I do presentations or lectures with new projects. So what I take out is all the projects I've been talking about for probably 15 years. So, houses of rooms and sequences of rooms and other houses with distance as an idea and so forth. So very elementary projects which are very important for us. And so there's a lot of these, I would say, strategies which are very important and are still important in these projects. And so, but now, of course, they come almost like, it's like we learn to speak. And so we speak. And so these perforations are a part of how we speak, I think. And yeah, they worked. You're welcome.
Hi.
thank you so much for the presentation. What strikes me the most in your presentation is the fact that all of these designs are actually built. So I was just wondering, how do you find your clients? Because I mean, it's not exactly a pizza plant isn't exactly the most effective for the more sort of for a factory, as in like. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, look. Well, I think most of the buildings you saw today are the result of competition. Not all of them, but quite many. The brewery was a competition. The crematorium was a competition. In a complicated way, the school as well. But I mean, there you could say there was an aspect of direct commission. The radio and television building was a competition. So I mean, so the short answer is, and a few more, but that the library or competition. The short answer is that mostly competition is the only way to get a project of a certain scale, also in Europe. Now it's also true that this is a context or a situation which is rapidly changing, unfortunately. I think the golden age of these type of projects probably ended 5-6 years ago. I think somehow with COVID, and COVID had maybe not so much to do with it directly, but you feel that the contexts have shifted. I mean, I think we also feel that the context globally has shifted, but also in Europe. Why is that? I don't know. There's increasingly less trust in the competition as a model to appoint architects, which I think is a big problem, quite frankly. I mean, I think if we should fight for something, it should to keep these competitions going. And we see that also in our own office. Now, it's true that not entirely, but it has been compensated a bit with the fact that here and there, I mean, for example, I was very shortly mentioned, I worked in Holland for 6 years, and in Holland, many offices I knew of, they were almost only working through competition. And then in 2008, the whole market collapsed. And I think then for 10 years, they had no work or something. Belgium has always been quite different. I mean, there's a very close relationship with clients. So our first batch of projects were smaller houses for private clients. But what you now start to see is that you also can keep these private clients for bigger projects sometimes. If you do not, to say that, try to find a nice expression, but I mean, they have to trust you. I wanted to say if you don't fuck around with them, but I mean, you know, in a sense, I cannot say that probably in the States, but no, it's important that I think all these projects, I would say proudly so, are ultimately making people happy. They might not like the process always, but when the building is there, I think the school is a very good example, the perforated school from just before. It was a complex deal because we were appointed by a developer to convince a school organization to make their school in that slaughterhouse. That's really how it went. So there was some sort of competition, which was that the school had several options. Building a new building somewhere else, even a tower somewhere, I don't know, and that slaughterhouse. And so we had to convince the school with the kind of project that the best idea was the slaughterhouse. So we could convince the school. So we won, right? So they said, okay, the school comes there. But that was the school, meaning that was not the department of biology and whatever, chemistry. So when they entered that whole debate, because they became our client, they thought, fuck these guys. I mean, that makes no sense. You know, this building, I mean, there's no walls, it's all glass. I mean, the perforations, the big sheds, that was not so much fun. So they were not so happy in a sense. But then the process went on, and then it was ready. They actually probably had to admit already then that it was actually quite good, but they didn't really. But then they had the first info, day, or how do you call that? Is when you present the school and its infrastructure to possible new students. And so there was a rush on the building. Everybody wanted to study because they wanted to study there. And so the question was typical, if we do chemistry, is it then their chemistry? Yeah. And so now they love the building. So you understand? So, but that's interesting. With which I want to say that people come back because ultimately we make good buildings, and that's silly to say that. But I believe in that. I mean, there's nothing complicated in architecture. If I can also not talk about it, you just walk in there and you say, yeah, it works. I think architecture like that, no? And it should not be. I mean, honestly, I taught for many years in the States. I taught for 9 years, 10 years at GSD, a few years at Columbia and in Yale, whatever. And I'm not saying it's a purely American affair, but there is a culture where things are so complicated. And then I'm like, well, wait, I mean, you just make a building, it should be used. It's a good or a bad building, right? It's like it is a high or low hall, is a good or a bad staircase. The door is in the middle or in the corner. I mean, this is architecture. All the rest is nonsense. And then you can explain it a bit, and you can have a good idea, and maybe you need a catalyst for your idea. So meaning, maybe you need, I don't know, maybe you need to organize your brain, right? So maybe you need a story. You need a story to come to a good decision. But it's very important, like a real catalyst, take it away and it's still a good building. That's a good architecture. I mean, if you need an explanation for a building, then be sure it's a bad building. You know? I mean, so I think that's important. So in that sense, clients, difficult. Competitions, yes. You don't always win the competitions you plan to win. Less and less competitions. But ultimately, I think you just have to make buildings which make sense.
Do we still have time? Yes. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm a professor of history and theory here, and I was fascinated how you used historical precedents in your presentation. I also grew up in São Paulo, so I love to Silina Bobardi, but also, Schinkel and Venturi. So can you share with our students how you use historical precedents in your work, as a process? We don't always see that in presentations of architects today. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, I think, first of all, I want to say this. We have an office which is run by two partners. Actually, there's even a third one whose name is never mentioned, but he actually runs our office properly, Jan. I mean, Jan Leenaerts, but okay. But I mean, let's say Kersten and David, right? Two partners. I think it's important that our work happens through dialogue. Meaning we are both always involved in all the projects, and we either like what we're doing or we don't like what we're doing. Now, I think in our dialogue, we don't always like things for the same reason. I mean, I don't know, at a certain point, the model or the plan or whatever is good. I don't know, we both think it's good. Maybe for me, the plan is good because it makes me think of a building of 1976 done by Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown. I don't know, right? For David, maybe, well, I don't know. He's thought of something else. And so I say this why? Because I also know people like that who want or think they can do architecture or culture in general by rooting it in the past in such a linear way that that what they think is good translate in what they want to make, and hence it must be good too, right? I mean, that's very often not true. I mean, I know people like that, and I think they make very bad things. So I think this dialogue with David, my partner, allows us to always be loose, to have plenty of thoughts, but to be too explicit about them. So maybe they crossed the mind, maybe an image was laying in the side, or I don't know, I did a studio with my students on somebody, or I was like, oh, wow, I would like to know Lina or Aldo and Hanni van Eyck, or what happened there. And so it's there, and it accumulates. The books are in the office, and the artworks are in the office sometimes, or the books of the artwork, or of course I have also quite a few ex-students who are in our office then again. So there's also this kind of culture that these things come in. And I believe in this kind of, I think, very dense in history and culture, but very light in how to say, imposition. It's very healthy. I mean, I once made a studio in Lausanne when I was still professor there, because we bought the building when I was a professor there. Then I moved to Mendrisio. Not immediately, but I mean, it's that time. And we made a studio which we called False Friends, and it has been very much something I liked as a team and still like very much today. But I find it very, how to say, a very good illustration of this. So a false friend, as we all know, in language, most typically that there's two words which look like the same, but almost mean the opposite, having opposite meaning. So I think classic example is the French English eventually in éventuellement, which the French always typically use eventually wrong, because they think it's possibly right, but it doesn't mean that at all, as you know. And that's nice, that's interesting, and that's history, that's culture, that's ancestors too. And in fact, in the history of architecture and the history of art, very often it was exactly these misunderstandings which were vital, which were crucial. I mean, I once, and I paraphrase here very quickly, but I once wrote a little text on how Alberti, in a sense, based his whole, I would say, syntax and his whole, architectural language on the false assumption that the Battisterio was Roman, which it wasn't. So, I mean, and that's okay, because he made fantastic work, and somehow that work is, I mean, Roman enough or something, so these things, these things I think play a fundamental role in our work. But and it's also what I think bound us together with our friends at San Rocco at the time when we made the magazine. So you look at everything, and you are allowed to love or to hate or to ridicule things, and there's no final judgment. I think that's really fundamental. I think then it's fun. Otherwise, it's a bit annoying. I don't know.
So on that note, we will end the lecture, and thank you, Kersten, for a fabulous lecture. Thank you.